When the word cancer shattered our world, I promised to be his rock, holding his trembling hand through every brutal chemo session. But while he lost his hair, his strength, his very fight to live, I was slipping further away, sneaking into the arms of another man. I told myself it was survival, a way to cope with the unbearable. But beneath it all, when remission failed, a sick part of me felt relief I couldn't explain. There was a time when I thought we'd grow old together in that house. Not a mansion, not even close. Just a 3-bedroom fixer, upper with a leaky faucet in the kitchen, and a back porch Ethan built with his own hands. It was ours. And that was enough. Our girls, Emma and Lily, used to chase each other barefoot across that porch every summer evening, squealing with laughter, their voices echoing off the worn wooden boards. Ethan would sit out there after dinner, beer in hand, watching them with a look in his eyes like he couldn't believe any of it was real. He was a good man, the kind of man who didn't need to be told to do the dishes, who packed the kids' lunches even when I offered. He knew how I liked my coffee. He remembered our anniversary without reminders. He kissed my forehead every morning, without fail, even when we were running late or annoyed at each other. And I loved him. I truly did. But love, I've learned, isn't armor. Sometimes it's just not enough to stop you from doing something unforgivable. Back then, everything felt steady, normal. I had just returned to work after taking a few years off to raise the kids. Marketing assistant at a mid-size firm. Nothing glamorous, but I liked the rhythm of it. The independence, the adult conversations, the lunches where no one spilled milk or needed help tying their shoes. Ethan was proud of me. I could see it in the way he looked at me when I got home, still in my heels, with that tired but satisfied smile. He never once made me feel guilty for working. He stepped in more at home, picked up the girls, helped with homework, handled bedtime stories on nights I stayed late. He was the glue holding everything together. I never meant to hurt him. If you'd told me then what I'd do, what I was already starting to feel, I would have called you insane. Because to the world, we were the perfect family. And in many ways we were. But cracks don't always show right away. Sometimes they form in silence, tiny, invisible fractures that only widen when no one's paying attention. For me, it started with nothing. That was the problem. There was no big fetment, no betrayal on his part, just stillness. He was predictable, steady, safe. But deep down, something in me wanted more. Something exciting. Something that made me feel alive again. Like I was more than a wife, more than a mother. Like I was still a woman worth wanting. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, everything still looked fine, until he started getting tired. At first, it was small. He'd come home from work and nap on the couch. I teased him about turning into an old man. He laughed it off, said the new guy at the office was a pain. That work was draining. Then came the night sweats. He'd wake up drenched, sheets soaked through, heart racing. I'd ask if he was okay. Just hot, he'd mumble, brushing it off. And I believed him. Because I wanted to. Because the alternative, that something might be wrong, felt too heavy to hold. Then he started losing weight. At first, I celebrated it. "You're finally catching up to me," I joked, poking his flatter stomach. He chuckled, but there was something vacant behind his eyes, and the bruises. God, the bruises. They showed up out of nowhere, dark purple splotches on his arms, his ribs. He didn't remember bumping into anything. One day, Emma hugged him, and he winced. He smiled at her, told her it was nothing. But when I saw him roll his shoulder later, pain etched across his face, my stomach sank. I told him to go to the doctor. He said he would. He didn't. Weeks passed. More bruises. More naps. A faint yellow tint under his skin that wasn't there before. I Googled. I spiraled. But I didn't push hard enough. Maybe because I was afraid. Maybe because a part of me, a selfish, terrible part, didn't want to face the weight of being needed that much again. One Saturday morning, he collapsed in the kitchen, The sound of his body hitting the floor was unlike anything I've ever heard. Lily screamed. I dropped the pan I was holding. Eggs splattered across the tile. He was breathing, barely conscious. Clammy. I called an ambulance. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Blood work, IVs, monitors beeping. Emma clung to my side, eyes wide and terrified. Lily cried in the waiting room, asking why Daddy wasn't waking up. Hours passed before a doctor finally came in. I don't remember her name. I only remember her eyes. Serious, kind, apologetic. We found abnormal white blood cell counts, she said, carefully. There's a high likelihood this is lymphoma. Stage 3, based on his symptoms. We'll need to start treatment right away. I nodded. I didn't cry. Not yet. I asked what we needed to do. What came next? I held it together, because that's what I always did. But later that night, when the kids were asleep, and I was alone in the bathroom of our house. The house that suddenly felt too big, too cold. I sank to the floor and sobbed into a towel. My perfect family, my perfect life was about to be taken away from me, and I couldn't accept it no matter what. The first few weeks after Ethan's diagnosis felt like a blur. A schedule of scans, blood work, paperwork, and sterile hallways. I became his second shadow. I organized his pills. Took notes at every appointment. Kept the girls distracted, so they wouldn't see him vomit behind a closed door. I packed lunches for the hospital. Played his favorite songs in the car. Massaged his scalp the night his hair started falling out. I did everything right. Everything a good wife should do. And yet, something in me was already slipping. Ethan changed. Of course he did. How could he not? But it wasn't just the physical toll of chemo. It was something deeper. He became quiet. Tired in his soul. Not just exhausted, absent. Sometimes I'd talk to him. Tell him something funny Lily said. Or how Emma had aced her spelling test, and he'd smile faintly, but his eyes would stay on the wall, like he was drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. And I tried. God, I tried, but I was starting to feel like a nurse, not a wife. The warmth between us dimmed. The touches became routine. Supportive, but not tender. Functional. The first time I saw him was in the oncology clinic waiting room. Ethan was back getting a CT scan, and I sat near the window, trying not to look too closely at the other patients. It was always too much. The sunken eyes, the gaunt faces, the coughs that rattled through bones. Then I noticed a man sitting 2 seats away. Late 30s, early 40s maybe. Clean cut, sharp jawline, coffee in hand. He looked out of place. Too healthy, too polished for that room. I must have looked like I was staring, because he smiled politely and said, "Waiting for someone." I nodded. My husband. He glanced down at the folder in his lap. Chemo day. Round 4. That was it. Just 2 sentences. But somehow, it felt like breathing fresh air. He didn't ask how I was holding up, or give me the usual sympathetic head tilt. He just talked. Casually, like we were 2 people in a coffee shop. Over the next few weeks, I saw him more. Always on Wednesdays. His dad's treatment day. Sometimes he brought 2 coffees and handed me one without asking. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Sometimes we talked too much. His name was Ryan. He worked in advertising. Divorced, no kids. He listened when I spoke. Actually listened, not just nodded. Not just waited for his turn to talk. I told myself it was harmless. A moment of connection in a life that felt like it was bleeding dry. At home, Ethan was getting worse. He couldn't keep food down. His gums bled. He stopped laughing. He stopped talking altogether some days. I'd crawl into bed next to him, exhausted, but wide awake. I'd listen to his breathing, terrified it would stop. But I also felt numb, like I was watching it all from a glass box, unable to reach him. One morning, I snapped at Emma for spilling orange juice. She burst into tears and ran to her room. I stood there, hands trembling, and realized I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in days, when Ryan texted me later that week. "Hey, I'm grabbing lunch at the deli downstairs, if you need a break today." I told myself it was just lunch, just 30 minutes away from hospital walls and sickness and sadness. I went. We talked. I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in weeks. It felt like cheating, even though nothing happened. That's how it starts, isn't it? Not with a kiss, not with a lie, but with relief, with escape. With the whisper of, I feel like myself again. At home, Ethan noticed I smiled more. He thanked me for staying strong. He had no idea I was slipping away from him, one waiting room lunch at a time. It was raining the day it happened. The kind of cold, quiet rain that makes the world feel softer, lonelier. Ethan had thrown up twice that morning. He couldn't even keep down water. His skin had gone pale, gray, and when he finally fell asleep on the bathroom floor, I didn't move him. I just sat beside him, holding a damp towel to his forehead, staring at the cracked tile we always meant to fix. I think it was then I made up my mind. I had finally had enough. Enough of being a babysitter to my husband. When he woke up hours later, I helped him into bed. He didn't say a word, just looked at me, hollow-eyed, like he wasn't really there anymore. I kissed his forehead, tucked him in, and told him I was going to the store. That was the lie. I didn't go to the store. I didn't even take my purse. I went to Ryan. I didn't plan it. I truly didn't. At least, that's what I told myself later. He texted me first. Hey, haven't seen you around. Everything okay? I don't know what made me say it. Maybe I needed someone to ask. Maybe I just needed to be wanted. Can I come over? I replied, my thumbs trembling. He didn't ask questions. Just sent an address. It was a loft apartment above a coffee shop. Warm lights, tall windows, music playing softly from a speaker in the corner. The kind of place that feels like it belongs to someone who hasn't had to watch anyone fall apart lately. He opened the door, looked at me, and knew. I hadn't said anything, but he knew. I don't want you to do anything you'll regret, he said gently, eyes searching mine. I should have left then. God, I should have left. But I stepped inside. And when the door shut behind me, it felt like crossing into another life. I kissed him first. I remember that. I leaned in, fingers curled into his jacket, trying to silence every thought screaming in my head. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't rough. It was slow, careful, like we were both trying to forget who we really were. He touched me like I mattered. Like I was more than a caregiver, more than a ghost inside a shell of responsibility. I hated how much I needed it. When it was over, we lay side by side in silence. I stared at the ceiling. He traced circles on my shoulder. I'm sorry, I whispered. He didn't answer. Maybe because he didn't know if I meant for being there, or for leaving soon. I didn't stay long. I couldn't. The moment I stepped outside, the guilt hit me like a train. I drove home in silence, windshield wipers beating against the rain, mascara streaking down my cheeks. I didn't know what hurt more, what I'd done, or how easily I'd done it. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled like bleach and sickness. The girls were asleep. The TV was still on low. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, staring at a half-empty cup of tea. His eyes met mine, and my stomach turned to ice. You've been gone a while, he said, voice soft, no accusation. Just observation. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He looked down at the table. I'm sorry, he murmured, for being like this, for not being who I used to be. That broke me. He thought I left because of him, because he was weak, because he was sick. He blamed himself. I walked over and hugged him, fiercely, desperately, and he apologized again, over and over, like he was the one who broke something. I held him and cried, not for him, for me, because in that moment, I realized just how far I'd fallen, and I still didn't stop. I told myself that would be the only time. I swore it over and over, while lying next to Ethan, his head resting weakly against my chest. While brushing Lily's hair in silence the next morning, while loading Emma's lunchbox, my hands shaking. But it wasn't the last time. It never is it? A week passed. then 2. And then I found myself texting Ryan again. I just need to breathe. Can I see you? Every time I left our house, I told myself I was escaping, not abandoning. That I was still showing up, cooking, cleaning, managing appointments. That I still loved Ethan. That I still loved my daughters. But I was lying to all of us. Because something inside me had cracked open. A hunger I hadn't felt in years. Ryan didn't ask anything from me. He didn't need help getting to the bathroom. He didn't cry when his body gave out. He didn't look at me like I was all that stood between life and death. With Ryan, I could pretend I was whole again. Desired, free, unburdened. I started staying longer each time. A quick visit turned into entire afternoons. Sometimes I didn't even check my phone. And the house I used to keep running like clockwork. It began to fall apart. Lily started asking if Daddy was mad at her, because he didn't smile anymore. Emma's grades dropped. I barely noticed. Homework remained half finished on the table. Laundry piled up. Ethan's meds went unfilled once. I forgot. I snapped at them more. Everything annoyed me. Noise, questions. Even Ethan's coughing fits felt like interruptions. One night, I found him on the bathroom floor again. Not collapsed this time, but crouched low, trying to clean up after himself. He had vomited blood, and instead of calling for me, he was using a towel to soak it up, as if apologizing for making a mess. When he saw me, he looked startled. "Sorry," he said softly. "Didn't mean to wake you. I wasn't asleep. I was texting Ryan. I didn't speak. Just turned around, walked out, and closed the door." The next morning, he apologized again. For bleeding. For being too much. He thanked me for everything. And told me he didn't know how he would have gotten through this without me. And I said nothing. Because I couldn't tell him the truth. That he wasn't getting through this with me. He was getting through it in spite of me. The girls grew quieter, too. They started asking to stay late at school. Emma pretended to be asleep when I came into her room. Lily stopped asking me to read her bedtime stories. I didn't fight it. Some part of me believed I deserved the distance. Another part, the uglier part, was just too tired to care. I kept going back to Ryan, kept feeding the fire. Some nights I'd lie to Ethan and say I had to work late. He'd nod, weakly, and say, "Be safe, be safe." Even then, even after everything, he worried about me more than himself. But I didn't stop. Not when the girls cried. Not when the house began to rot from silence. Not even when Ethan's eyes lost that last bit of light. Because by then, I wasn't the woman he married anymore. I was someone else. Someone I wouldn't recognize in a mirror. Someone who left her husband dying, and her daughters grieving, to feel wanted for a few hours. And I knew, deep down, that I was never going to be able to take any of it back. Nothing changed. Not really. Ethan's remission didn't last. At first, the doctors said it was a setback. A few stubborn cells fighting back. They promised more tests, new treatments, hope, but deep down, even they knew. The last appointment was the hardest. The oncologist's face was pale, eyes tired. "We're seeing progression," she said quietly. "It's not looking good anymore." I nodded. But inside, something shattered. A part of me felt relief. Relief that the fight, the exhausting, endless fight, might finally end. That maybe, after all the pain and secrets, there would be an end to this nightmare. But the other part, the part that kept me awake at night, drowned in guilt. Guilt for every stolen moment, every lie, every time I chose escape over loyalty. I didn't know who I was anymore. The woman I had been, the wife Ethan deserved, confused, broken, lost. I drove home that day in silence. The house was quiet. The girls were at school. Ethan was sleeping in the back bedroom, his breathing shallow. I stood in the hallway, watching him rest. And I wondered, if I told him everything, would it break him, or would it finally set us both free? But before I could decide, my phone buzzed. A message. From Ryan, "Miss you." And just like that, I put all my thoughts on hold, going back to living my double life, For now. Just for another day.